On this week's podcast, we've got my good friend and tournament pro, Joe Okada. He's going to talk about his move from head-to-head fishing from other tournament circuits, and we're going to get kind of digging in deeper than we did last time when Joe was here. So he's honest. Wait till you see what he's got to say. Welcome back to the Bigwater podcast, Joe Okada. Thank you for... Oh my God, it's the mug already. If you have to stop and go to the bathroom like you did last time because of that mug...
There wasn't a bathroom break last time, was there?
I was just checking. I mean, I just figured there was.
No, there was not. There was not a bathroom break.
A little different. We got producer dude on. He's going to maybe ask you some questions and stuff too. That way, you know... Basically, we need to be roped in. That's what...
That's exactly it. I have to keep Ross in check.
Yeah. we figured this is going to be like everything else in life, and there's like, I have to have a handler to like drag Ross back in. Crazy grandpa, come back in.
Wrong rabbit hole, guys. Come on.
Anyhow, so let's talk about, I mean, I'm going to kind of throw you under the bus a little bit, because if you know we're buddies, we're talking the other day, and you were kind of hitting me up. You're like, so, hey, what do you think about this on Erie? And I'm like looking, and I'm like, oh, there's a tournament coming to Lake Erie. Or
why
Detroit
else
River.
would you expect a phone call from me, Ross? Do you want me just to say hi? Like, just, hey, I just called just because I wanted to visit with Ross Robertson. No, I pretty much needed something.
That's so dumb for me to think that. But, you know, in all seriousness, I mean, I can even see him in the background there. If you're a real little sneaker like I am, I see those fly tying vices. And, you know, does it ever end? I mean, people always, the number one thing that people ask me, guide clients or whatever, they're like, so what do you do in the winter? I mean, I really don't have any downtime. I'm busier than I want to be. I mean, I'm working 7 days a week right now. And are you kind of the same way?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you call it work, if it's screwing around with fishing gear. Well, it is, I guess, but it's still fun. Well, but right after I got done talking to you, I took two different hair jigs, one with, you know, fake hair, and one was real bucktail, and then it was bath time for Abigail, so she was in there playing, getting all cleaned up with Mom, and I'm sitting there playing with different bucktails, you know, feeling the resistance of the hairs in the water, and figuring out if I had too much or not enough on there to get the right fluff. And that's just what we do, Ross.
You know, I've had people get mad at me because I chest lures in their swimming pool. But when you're literally putting hair jigs around your daughter in the bathtub, like, your wife she is a saint.
It's a big bathtub. There's plenty of room for both of us.
I would expect nothing less from a big baller like Joe Okada. But yeah, I mean, that's just, I don't, that is, and when you say it's not work, I mean, it is work, because if you don't do this stuff, I mean, you're right, it's fun work, and we don't look at it like that because our job's different. But if you don't do that preparation, you're going to be screwed come whenever that tournament is, April or whatever.
Yes, a week before the thing starts, and you're still not. Those are the last things you want to be thinking about. You got to be onto the nitty gritties by then, not the minute stuff. You know?
And that tournament's in the Detroit River, and like if you run out of jigs, which could happen, because I mean there are certain stretches there that it's just like hang up. That's not a good situation. Like, what do you do?
What is the gnarliest stretch in that river, if there was one that's worth fishing, but you just know you're going to sacrifice a lot of goods down there?
I mean, the answer is there's no answer, but I remember, I don't know what it is. Don't quote me on numbers. You can Google this, but Detroit police pulled like 42 cars out of the Detroit River off E-course,
Zug Island.
So yeah, producer dude lives kind of towards that way, and yeah, a car, apparently, like when you get around the door handles and up in there, like they hook jigs real well. So, like, it doesn't matter what kind of line you got or whatever. I think the other one would be down in the Trenton Channel, because that is just, it's gnarly. They've got a lot of rocks in there to keep from erosion and stuff because of the discharges. I mean, the current really rips through there. So that one's really bad. That, and I think you've got so many people that have used junky line and jigs through the years that you're hooking on them. You know, it's like that where I grew up in the Maumee River. Like, I can remember they had a tree that they had to end up cutting because it was restricting things.
Whoa.
Mr. Professional
is this your first
Ross.
time?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did not turn his phone off.
I am so guilty, and I had it on only because, I mean, I'm going to defend myself, because I had somebody, Mr. Technological, that I even told producer dude, I'm like, Joe, we won't have any problem because he's Mr. Techie, but yet we took 20 minutes to get your ass on here. God.
You could have just given me a text saying 20-minute heads up, I need you, and that would have been just fine.
I literally got a phone call, and in fairness, Joe, we had some things swapping around with some people, and so Joe jumped on a little faster.
Okay.
I'll say it. Thank you, Joe.
No problem. But that extra fishing line reminds me of up on Beta Knock, where I used to go every winter. There's a series of net stakes along certain stretches, and they've all clobbered everybody's segmented lead core for decades. So there's just massive piles of lead core that'll just eat you. You're not even hooking on the stakes anymore. You're just hooking everybody else's line. You can see the disaster down there as you're going over them, but you still got to troll those lines, because those are the Indians didn't put their net lines there for no reason. I mean, those were the contact points where those fish make their pushes, and it just makes sense to follow a lot of those areas. But yeah, it gets gnarly.
In the Maumee River where I grew up, in the summertime, it would be like ankle deep, maybe knee deep in the holes, with the water levels. And some of those logs and things that were in there, they'd go out because they'd be jamming stuff up or be a problem if they moved around. And I remember seeing some of those. And I'm telling you, if that log weighed 1,000 pounds because of just wood, it weighed 3,000 pounds because of lead. I mean, it was just like covered in half 3/4 ounce jigs. I mean, dude, it looked like a line factory meets like a lead plant. It was just nasty, and twister tails all rotted all over it. But
nice.
At any rate, so bring me into this whole like prep thing, because I know you're a tinker guy and you do a lot of preparation, more than even a guy that thinks that they prepare. I like to kind of put myself in that same category, even though you're more outside the box.
You do. You just try to, you take the time when you have it to try to either fine tune or go one step further than you probably really need to. But when you have that little extra time to go do some research or tinker around with something or look at something underwater or go down to the little bit of river that's still open and just watch stuff in the water. I mean, all those little things just help keep your wheels turning in the off season when you're not able to be on the water, and not being able to be on the water makes you go dull if you don't do those things to kind of fill in the gaps and just keep your brain headed in the right direction.
So what is the thing? I realize people listen to this. There's probably some guys that fish some weekend tournaments. There's hopefully even some guys that they won't admit to it, but they fish tournaments for a living and they're watching this, because I've seen them. But are there anybody really, what are the things that applies, you think, to the average guy preparation wise you see, even if a guy's just fishing on the weekends, that they don't do? I mean, again, tying a custom jigs and testing them in the bathtub with your kid.
Taking the most delicate nail file and just going over a box of jigs that you haven't been taking care of, and then holding up every single jig to the light and making sure that every point isn't rolled and just barely off, and you just give it a little touch before you carefully put it back where it belongs, so that when it comes time to actually wanting to pull that jig out of the box 6 months from now, I don't have to think about reaching into my pocket to grab this, because it's something I already touched on when I was just screwing around, not being able to focus on my computer and just sitting here in the office touching up jigs. It's little things like that.
Can I be honest right now? I don't know if this is probably going to come across horrible, but I don't really give a shit. So Back in the day, I used to do all that. Okay. Nowadays, I literally just the other day, a buddy dropped off like 200 hair jigs that were custom done for me, and I had them poured with Gamakatsu hooks that I gave the guy, because he pours them with these like 4/0 hook. I mean, the thing, you couldn't even stick it in your arm if you wanted to. And so I had them poured with some Gamakatsu hooks, and I'm kind of to the point that what you say is absolutely true. I'm to the point where I've noticed such a difference, especially like ice fishing, or when I put some replacement hooks on some existing baits that I have, let's say 1,000 of. So that would be 3,000 hooks that I have to do. So it's not practical, for what I'm doing. And they're still good hooks. But when you put those really high-end hooks on, it's like, oh my God. And so for things where like a hair jig, on Lake Erie or even in the Detroit River, yeah, it's a lot of extra. It's a pain in the ass, but it is really a significant changer in your fishing.
Yeah, it does. And you're right. At some point, you have such an overabundance of terminal stuff to touch on, like all your hooks. And sometimes it's easier just to grab a different 30-cent jig and move on with your life. But when everything that you are planning to have at your disposal is in the best shape possible, all that makes a difference at some point. But you can go overboard, but if you have a little bit of extra time to go overboard, do it, because eventually you're going to get set back into normalcy anyway. So
do you know what one for me is like that I think that applies to guys, because I see it all the time and I just laugh, to be honest with you, is I tie leaders and put them on a swim noodle, for dipsies or jets or just whatever, crankbaits. And I've got all those things tied up because I'll actually use leaders with my crankbaits too when I'm using snaps a lot. Because if you get a little junk fish on, this is a tip for somebody. I mean, if you're fishing snap weights on a consistent basis, which we often do at certain times of year, whether the fish are deep or because you're using a different style, stick bait or something, if you don't put a swivel in there, at some point, whether you speed up, make a hard turn because some jackholes pulls in front of you, I've had that, and all of a sudden you're tangling your stuff up, or you just do something boneheaded on your own, or the big one for me is like a small walleye. We've got 150 million walleyes in Lake Erie, right? You hook into an 8-incher. I don't care if he's on there immediately or not. That dude comes in and he's a fishing line wrecker. You're gonna have just a bird's nest of shit.
Yeah, Lake Erie was. I'm glad we got out there again this year towards the end of the year. It was neat. I haven't seen that many fish on my locator in a couple of years.
I'm glad you guys stayed far away from me.
Ridiculous. I wouldn't. I should have called you before we came out there and looked for my little hot
hey buddy.
Did you get a hey buddy call from me before I come out there?
No, I think I texted you, leave me alone.
Maybe you might have actually. But
I did.
I wasn't planning on. I figured you had already received. A couple of phone calls.
In fairness, you're in a different league, but I'm pretty sure if you look back, I texted you something snarky like, hey, at least you're staying far enough away, I don't have to deal with you.
I think so.
But yeah, those tournament things are just, oh my God, sometimes I roll my eyes. Not because of that, but just some of the stuff on the water, you know what I mean? I hate to say it, I don't think tournaments are bad, but when you have a 150 boat event coming in, and you're guiding or doing your deal, there's not everybody that's really sportsman-like. That's the PC way of saying, if I wasn't on my own podcast and I couldn't kind of say it like I was, I just somebody being a jackhole.
It's a different level of intensity. Even on Lake Erie, where you're not always pointing the boat towards that one specific little nipple on that one little juicy part of the rock pile. Even though you're not making a beeline for that, you still have a general idea of where the life that you wanted to go touch is located, and you don't want to deviate off of that. And when they're in the heat of the moment, and in a tournament, it's easier to stick to your line a little bit more than on a casual day of fishing. And I get it.
So here's a funny story that happened yesterday.
But I'm not defending anyone's reckless behavior on the water by
yeah, I mean, tournament guys are the worst. When I was in high school traveling with Roach,
you were a tournament guy. You're talking about, it's like you've never fished a tournament yourself.
But I honestly think you can say a lot of things about me. My mouth never stops moving. I'm not afraid to call it like it is. Has anyone ever accused me of jumping them?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. So here's a funny one yesterday. You'll get a kick out of this because, again, it's funny too because producer dude, he's been with me. I mean, we've been doing fishing stuff together, shooting shows and content for over a decade. But yet, he's not a fishing guy. So he sees some of this at a different element. That's why we've asked him to kind of come on the podcast this year and rope us in or get a different guy's perspective. Because sometimes when we're doing these, me and you come across as, I don't want to say elitist, but this is how we make our living. We are serious about this. Like people listening to this, they're not generally speaking that serious about it. Like they like to fish. So it's a different perspective, right? So yesterday we're out and I'm not going to lie to you, I hadn't been out for a few days. We're doing other business stuff, having meetings and stuff. So we're like, hey, the weather's going to be great. We're going to go shoot a deal. I won't even tell you what we got going on because if this doesn't run until then, we want people to kind of be surprised what happened. But at any rate, I got a little intel from one of the guys that, runs with me and does stuff. And he's like, hey, the fish are over here and this and that. Well, I get out that morning and, I'm like, man, I don't see it. There's nobody. there's nobody out there. And most importantly, the guy that gave me the info ain't where he was. We all get help. I'm just going to tell you straight up. So, everybody. I mean, it's flat calm, Joe. There is nobody within miles. And I'm like, this is not a good sign. And I'm looking at the graph and there's nothing. It's empty. Zilch. Zero. Okay. This is your, like, producer dude doesn't even know what's going to come out of this. So long and short, I just put the old deal up and I do what I do best. I mean, the thing that I do best is I go find them by just watching my hummingbird. Like, I've got everything set up that I am really good at marking those. You don't have to be good at it. You just have to have confidence and have the setup right. Anybody can do it. It's not like when me and you first started using flashes and all that. And I find a pod, and I was yelling at producer dude. He'll, I'm sure, go, yeah. Because I'm like, I found a pod that was like 400 or 500 yards long, and they were thick.
There was a lot, for sure.
And I'm like, and he's like, well, let me white bounce. I'm like, we got to go, mother.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, these fish were on the move. You know, they moved a lot. And I'm like, go, go, go. So I was in tournament mode. Any rate, we had to be flaring the net around looking like just like the first day we ever done this. I'm manhandling them. We got fish everywhere, rods laying all over. I look behind me, and there is a dude. I mean, how close was that boat? The guy literally just sets down on top. I mean,
200 yards.
If he was,
yeah,
I would say he was 300 feet. Whatever. He sets up, and the funny part of the whole thing, and I tell the guy with me, and I don't know if you caught this or not, producer dude, but I was just like, what a moron. And, you know, again, producer dude's probably thinking I'm saying that from a different way than I am. But he set up directly behind me. Like, I just plucked the easy ones. Like, if you're going to spud somebody.
Now I get it.
Go off to the. He's But, I mean, you set up to the side, so at least you're not running over and taking the scraps, right? But I just thought to myself, I'm like, you know, and again, when I was 20, I handle that differently than I do now. And again, there's only 10 boats on the lake, you know, that time. The smirk says it all, so you just go ahead and say what you're thinking. Because when I tell you the closer on this, you're going to laugh your ass off.
Well, I'm listening, Ross. Go ahead. Let's hear the closer. Because basically, boats have body language on the water. And if you spend any amount of time on the water and if you were to watch yourself out there, first you're probably doing this out there trying to find your fish, if you know, at 20, 30 miles an hour or whatever you're doing, and then he sees you going derby him over, you go and then sit down and you're scrambling. Well, you're getting set
there
up.
Was nobody where we were at, and then this guy comes in and it was flat calm. And you know what, you know this, people, I have to even remind myself, because you know, I never stop mouthing. People can hear me freaking in
you can hear everything from every boat.
That's exactly right. So all of a sudden, when somebody talks in another boat and you're like, holy shit, they heard every word I was saying, right? Well, I don't care, but anyhow, the guy that was with me said something, and I watched the boat do a 90-degree turn. and I think it was more because I said, why would you drive right behind me? Because you're not going to get the scraps. Like, go to the side. Like, this school wasn't huge, but they weren't just 200 feet wide or whatever our path is, right? But it was a very short school, and when you're out of them, dude, you're out of them. So I dropped the boat off, and again, it's 30-some degrees. It's a pain in the butt and everything. And one of the fish cleaning places was actually open in Port Clinton. So I go, I'm just dropping these off. Like, I only keep fish once or twice a year. I want to clean my fish. I just, whatever it is, right? And I take this cooler, and guys are kind of looking. They're kind of, you know what I mean? They're talking, the guys that are working there, and there's this bunch of guys hanging out drinking coffee. And here comes a guy from the other room, and he's like, so how'd you do? And he's talking to this guy he obviously knows. And I look, and it's the guy that was behind me.
100% sure.
300%, because his boat was in the parking lot.
That's a lot of percentage. Oh, okay. You actually saw him.
His boat was in the parking lot, and he might have had distinctive rain gear on. But at any rate, and he says to the guy, here's the part, there's like a lot of wind up for just like, I don't know if you'll laugh your ass off, but even producer dude hasn't heard of this. So the guy's coming out. He obviously, the owner of this place, or the guy knows this guy. And he goes, so how'd you do? Well, obviously, they got their fish. Like, me and you will throw every fish back. We don't care. Most people are going to bring in what they caught. And he's obviously taken to a processor, so he is. And he says to the guy, he goes, yeah, it was pretty tough. Really didn't catch a whole lot there. But once I found him, we caught him okay there for a little bit. and again, maybe it's more mature, Ross, but when the guy was like, once I found him, I'm like, know what you found? You found both my nets up in the air and rods and chaos, and my producer yelling at his lungs, like, turn, let me see you, talk.
That is totally more mature, Ross. to not
He
say
is
anything.
maturing, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I met him 10 years ago, and it was a little crazy. I feared sometimes out there.
Yeah, it's not as bad as Big Head. It's not as bad as Big Head, but we know we're getting better. Well, but it's just funny that, again, if this happens in April out there, it's kind of a bigger problem. Or if I'm with the guide clients, it's a bigger problem. And again, sportsmanship or whatever. And I guess what I said, that had nothing to do with tournament fishing, but that's kind of a tournament fishing story.
I've seen it on tournament days, and I've seen it and just every other day on the water. It's just the way it is. I mean, you can only do this with your net so much before it probably attracts some attention. Do you know what I mean, Ross?
I do. I have a few tricks with that, but I'm certainly not going to put them on a podcast and how I maneuver that. But the problem is,
I think is one of them when you
do not seriously don't. That has been a hit. I will seriously be pissed right now. That's a 20-year trick that no one knows. Okay, you will not.
Well, hey, I just wanted to.
Yes, you know it.
Joe, come on, do it. Do it.
I see it. I see it in his pic. You can see it in his pictures. I know his trick. I do. And it's a good one. But anyways.
Yeah, that was. I never get mad about saying stuff or whatever, but that one is one of those that has worked so effectively for literally 20 years that I'm not letting.
I could see it. That was serious. I will jump through this computer.
That was this interview. But in all seriousness, it doesn't matter if you don't have sportsmanship or whatever. And I know we're going down a rabbit hole to whatever, but I literally have like no notes for you. I just didn't even do anything because we're free balling. But in the cold water periods, I think you fish the same way I do. We kind of try to do your own thing, but in the cold water periods, it's much tougher to do that because the fish are tighter and they are where they're at. And maybe it's a water clarity thing or a temperature thing, usually both. But you can't find freestyle like me and you like to do as much in the cold water periods. Is that fair?
It is, and I think the feeding windows or your opportunities to really make hay seem to be shortened a little bit too. Whether it's a power hour deal, first or last light, or just some random thing that happens throughout the night or the day that fires them up. It just seems like you have shorter windows to really capitalize on things.
Well, it's funny you say that because even yesterday, the guy that we were with is a veteran fishing guy and producer. Like I said, he's been with me an awful lot of days. We filmed for over a decade together. And they were like, what time are we launching? And, it was 8 a.m., but don't get me wrong. You look at the temperatures, at 8 a.m., the temperatures are below freezing. And, 10, 11 o'clock, it's going to be above freezing. There's no rain. But I was telling these guys, it's January, okay? It's open water ice fishing. And what happens in January when you're ice fishing at 10, 11 o'clock in the day? You pretty much go, better have got them or I got a long wait.
You go perch fishing.
Yeah, exactly. You go perch fishing. And that's pretty much what happened. We got out there in the first couple hours, granted, we kind of had what we needed to do. But, that window, you're absolutely right. Early and late. It's there because one of the guys that runs for me went out in the evening and he was doing some different stuff and some things we're kind of working on. And he was like, man, things ain't working real good. And then he just, he texts me at like 6 o'clock when he was driving home. He's like, oh, we just thunder plowed him there at the end. And we did a podcast with an ice fishing guy. And he even said, he goes, everybody looks like a hero, first thing and last thing. He goes, it's the guy in the middle of the day that kind of, that's the guy that picks a few out, that's a difference maker. And that's a not only fair statement, I think it's pretty damn accurate.
It's not, that's not just on Erie. That's everywhere right now, I think.
But anyway, I monopolized and went off in a rabbit hole like I often do. I can't believe producer dude didn't shoot me down on that one. But so other prep wise, you tying these hair jigs, I'm buying them at this point, even though I've got a buddy who's like really good at making them. Is it as good as if Joe made them for me? No, probably why I'm going to steal a few of yours. But what are other things that you do that you feel like, hey, I can't buy this and I need to do it? Like for me, it's spinners.
Yeah, I pretty much, I don't even know if I'll look at my spinners this year, which is weird because next year I'm fishing an artificial only tour. And unless I'm out fun fishing, I won't have a worm in my boat all year. And so, can you imagine taking your forte out of the boat and just relying on crankbaits for the rest of the of your season, Ross? I don't think you could.
I think even publicly I've made these comments, but I can remember, basically breaking up with a girl because she was mad I put, night crawlers. I had like water, mustard, and night crawlers, and she's like, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Those are the things that pay for everything that I do. Like that's my deal." You know what I mean? Like I'm really good. That's what I'm good at. And I just don't feel like, as much as I've played with spinners, and again, if you live in Southeast Iowa or, I don't know, pick a place that you go, hey, they got some walleyes, but it's not the deal. Like where I live, let's just be honest, it's the best place there is. So I think what I mean by that is you can get away with things here that you can't get away with in central Wisconsin where you're at. Like, ain't gonna happen. And I have not found an alternative where I can even remotely consistently catch fish with an artificial bait on a spinner. Have you?
Yeah. No.
Simple answer is no. There's exceptions.
I was thinking of a couple exceptions, but it's not something that you just seamlessly swap out for that presentation. I mean, you pretty much have to completely abandon that whole program and target different fish in different ways that you would never even be pulling a spinner across anyway.
And so, I think if somebody's listening to this, probably where you're going with this, I could be wrong, but how I'm fishing with a 2 or 3 hook crawler harness, fishing them anywhere from suspended to near bottom, or maybe on bottom with a 3-way or a bottom bouncer or something like that deal. If you use an artificial with it, I'm not saying that you can't catch them. It's like 90% less, or it's not consistent. At times I couldn't catch anything, but maybe the exception would be like some type of slow death with a short plastic.
Yep. And God, do you remember back in the day when they had, there was the Trigger X Nightcrawler back in the day. That was, but before they discontinued them, I had bought a whole bunch of those, and that was a halfway decent substitute when you just either you were going through weeds and you just couldn't, you were worried of ripping your live bait off the hooks, or the panfish were so bad, or you were just getting attacked by other nuisance fish that you just wanted to keep something on the hooks for a little bit longer because you knew the walleyes were mixed. If you're white perch schools, I'm sure there's times you want to just be able to rip through those white perch, or hope that you still have something left on the hooks that a walleye might want to eat, so that it just buys you a few more minutes in the water.
Funny story, and maybe this will help you because this is all the help I'm going to give you. I like you. Is when you come back now, our white perch, I don't want to say they're non-existent. They're either have been eaten, or they're so afraid to do anything that they don't come into play like they used to, because we have 100 bazillion walleyes. The problem we have when fishing anywhere near the bottom, and I say near the bottom meaning 5 feet, but I've had it suspended over 50 feet of water as well, is like walleyes. That's why I mentioned about the swivel for the crankbait, is like 6, 7, 8, 9-inch walleyes.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, dude, and you're catching walleyes 20 inches that are spitting up 4 or 5, a dozen. I think my record's like 20 some little tiny walleyes or perch. I mean, they're just cannibals right now, man. Cannibals.
Yeah. Yep. Saw that on Lake of the Woods too. I mean, the saugers are just the delicacy for the bigger walleyes out there. Nothing's safe. I mean, they just eat everything.
So how much you're fishing head-to-head fishing is what you're doing moving forward?
Yeah, that's the artificial only circuit for next year.
And you're a spinner guy too. You're a hot stick when it comes to spinner fishing. Like I wouldn't, if I'm going to put people I want to go against fishing spinners, you probably would not be the guy I'd want to go head to head with. I mean, I'd still take your ass. Don't get me wrong.
No doubt in my mind.
Even producer guys rolling like, I saw that coming.
It's fun. They're fun to fish, and I like getting. I used to really like getting really technical with them. Changing the sink rates from going from glass to plastic beads, and I mean, just doing a lot of different things to really fine tune the spinners, and in the last couple of years, I haven't hardly fished them much at all, and I don't know why. I just haven't. So
I haven't either, to be honest with you. And I think some of it is I don't want to say laziness, because I wouldn't want to attach that to myself, because I'm definitely not a lazy guy. But I think instead I'll use the word efficient. How about that? Make it sound better. Right now with the walleyes, like we said, there's so many of those small walleyes. And the other thing is when you're fishing spinners, you have to be on fish. like spinners going fast, and I know I'm opening up Pandora's box on this, but how we're fishing spinners a lot, you're not going fast. I feel like the advantage is to go slow. But the disadvantage is you're going to cover, let's say we're going a mile an hour, and that's the effective speed. If I control a crankbait at 3, at the end of the day, I'm just going to cover so much more water to get in front of those active fish. And with Erie's fishing totally different. Like a couple years ago, you could put your stuff down and you could just pick up at the end of the day. And you'd catch them, sporadically, just constant. Now It's like we're on these pods and you just catch 5, 6 at a time. And when you're outside of them, dude, you ain't on them. Even though there's millions of fish. So it's like they almost are like stacking up like wolf packs. But, and when I started in, let's say the 80s, that's kind of how it was out here too. Like there was packs. People used to say, oh, it's the Westchester pack. And these schools were 3-4 miles long because there was only just a handful. Now it's like those are a lot smaller, but they're compacted. And you can get away and get on your own stuff, but it usually doesn't last long because of what we were joking about earlier.
There's still a biomass in those same areas, but then there's different densities within that biomass that indicate the feeders, and then that's what you're focusing on, right?
Yeah, and that's a tough deal with clients, because it'd be like yesterday when we were filming that. If I had clients and we got 5 or 6 on at a time, guys are just they're reeling, they're doing whatever they want because they're like, oh, we're just gonna smash them today, and it's like, no, we got a 2-hour window, so you don't want to speed things up too much. You know what I mean? You want them to have fun, but they don't understand. Like, hey, we're gonna have to pick all this up and spend 20 minutes getting back around, getting set up to come through again. In order to do it right, or we're going to get 1 or 2 here. And even like the guy that was with me, he lost a couple fish because he was kind of getting hot dog in it. And it's like, you still have to do the principles. Spinner fishing, the same thing. Like spinner fishing, the people that don't like it, I think it's because they don't want to fish slow enough and they don't pay attention. Mistakes you make when spinner fishing, the little ones, are proportionally a lot bigger than crankbait fishing. I know that's kind of I know you're trying to process that, but that's a big statement. But I think it's.
Do you think you were just talking? Do you think that went over my head? Is that
no,
what you
but
just
I could see you processing it. I mean, you're not that smart, obviously, but you fish for a living. We're both dumb,
both idiots,
just morons. I tell people all the time, they're like, "Man, this is amazing." I'm like, "Yeah, if you're smart enough to do this, you should, don't be dumb enough to do it." But yeah, I mean, crankbaits you can just get away with more. You just can. It's easier. It is easier. And I'm pulling crankbaits and I don't even really like it, but it's so effective in the hookup ratio and the landing ratio, generally speaking, to me with clients and people that don't do it. It's so much better that it's hard to get away from.
It is slightly more gratifying though to tighten up, to lean on a fish on the initial hookup with a spinner on a short lead than it is on a crankbait, though, isn't it? I mean, it's
open
fun.
Water live bait fishing. I mean, when you drop, I mean, I've done this hundreds of days for 20 years, right? And I still, when I see a fish come off and I drop on them, and I get them the second or third time, I still feel like I'm the king of the world right there. Like that you're awesome. Like you outsmarted them. It's that feeling of tight, like you said, to feel the tighten up deal. It's like open water live bait fishing, like a rigging but with boards.
Love it. Yep. That was one of my favorite feelings in trolling. Is like you said, especially when the cat and mouse starts coming into play. I mean, that's like, ooh, the hook's in that time.
and I got to be honest, like with guiding, I thrive on betting guys $100 that there's a fish on. Like I've got some baller clients, and I'll be like, hey, why don't you put your money where your mouth is? They're like, dude, there's no fish on that. And I'll be like, dude, there's a fish, hang on there. He's like, that's bull. You said that 20 seconds ago, and you go out there and you drop on them because, I mean, they literally I don't know what's going on there, but I know that when I said there was a fish on there, I knew there was. And here I go over and I'll drop and tighten up and just kind of,
Yeah.
Crazy deal.
Love it.
So tell me about this head-to-head thing. So, I mean, I don't know I don't expect you to give away any things because me and you have talked privately with some stuff that I definitely, for respect, I wouldn't put it up on here. But how is this going to change your preparation? How is this going to change how you tournament fish? Because, like on Major League Fishing, okay, you've watched guys that no longer care about, for people that don't know, it's about basically you have a size minimum or whatever, but let's say a 1 pound fish, you could catch 51 pounders and a guy that weighed 45 pounds for 5, you're going to win. So
yep, you're right. Well, it's 2 pounders now. That minimum's been up, but regardless, you're not you're trying to get you're maximizing your fish per hour versus looking for the largest targets, in your area, and just hoping to get 5 of them in a day. And part of that makes me a little nervous because I really enjoy getting into an area and settling in and really taking everything in that's happening that day into account, and then methodically working through a process to extract fish out of areas however they need to be extracted. But then but I think in this new format, your back's going to be against the wall all the time, and you're literally going to know that everybody else is already on them pretty hard, and it puts a different pressure on you, and you're not able to pace yourself at a bite an hour anymore if you know you're after the right bite. So part of me is a little nervous that's gonna throw a loop in possibly my performance initially, or maybe it'll enhance it. I don't know.
Like Brett update, score tracker update. Brett King has just caught 20 fish for 40 pounds. And you're like, shit.
And he's right there, and that makes me feel even worse.
but okay, let's break this down. Let's be real here, because this is a debate that's been going on with Major League Fishing, right, for a couple of years or whatever they've been doing it. You get some dude that's in there, and he gets on a little school of them, of schoolers, right, and he's throwing topwater in there, and he catches like 22 pounders. If you have some guy that catches, okay, so let's say it's 25 2-pounders. And he's got, 50 pounds, right? And you literally catch 5 10-pounders, but you're like an ounce behind. And you lose to a dude that just caught a pile of 2-pounders, and you literally weighed like what is considered to be one of the bigger bags of all time in tournaments. Can you tell me that's not going to chap your ass, or you don't think that that's legit? Because you've been doing that format forever, like the Bass Masters format?
It will at first, because that's... for the last 20 years, that's how we've, those are the sites we've set our sights on, the biggest specimens we can find that day, and you only need a few of them. So that's going to be interesting, but that doesn't take away the fact that there was a set criteria for how you should play your day, and what your objective is for the day, and if you don't meet that, regardless if you're fishing for numbers or for absolute size, I mean, you just have to. It's still a competition, and you just have to compete differently. I don't know. You can't look at it that way, Ross. You have to look at it differently. But I totally understand what you're saying.
You ain't wrong. But let's just be straight up. If I was fishing against you in that derby, and I weighed 51 pounds catching 25 fish, and you caught 5 fish for 50 pounds. And you lost me by less than a pound, and you had a 50-pound stringer, 5 10-pounders, you're going to tell me that wouldn't chap your ass. Not just because you lost. There's no way. I mean, you can say whatever, and I don't disagree with you. The rules are the rules. You know what they are. So you have to adapt to them. Maybe it's the old school in me, because even the Bass guys are having this conversation. They're like, wait a minute, some dude just went over and he did this, and that's not fishing. Like, do people want to watch that? That's a bigger debate here. People are like, who wants to watch a guy catch 25 2-pounders on TV? We want to see KVD catch a bunch of 5-pound largemouth.
I hear you. I totally understand
Producer
what you're
dude
saying.
is chiming in.
Chiming in. I would like to know Joe's opinion of how Ross would react to that.
I think we just got a little glimpse of how Ross would react under those circumstances. I just don't know. So you've got 2 guys out there, and they both played their day differently. One targeted 10-pounders, and he miraculously came away with catching a 10 of them, or 5 of them, whatever you said, and that's great. Going into the tournament, a tournament that's not a 5-fish maximum limit, it makes you wonder if that was the right strategy to begin with. And I don't know. But you're right. Does it take more skill to catch a larger grade of fish, even though it's less, or does it take a higher? Is it more skillful to be the most efficient angler out there possible and just maximize pure catching throughout the day? Because if you and I are in the same school of 4-pounders, it still comes down to whose workflow allowed them to catch more fish in a shorter period of time. And that there's also skill and preparation and things that go into that to making sure that you're on top of that as well. You
the
agree?
irony here is so deep because early in my career, you live on Lake Erie, and I can remember having days, and I still remember the guy like it was yesterday. We were catching 7-pounders. This is back like in the early 90s. We're catching 7-pounders like they're coming out of our eyes. Now, even right now in Lake Erie's many fishes, if you can catch 7-pounders, I mean, look at the NWT last year. I mean, or last in the fall. A 5-pound average, dude, you're the king of the deal. Like, nobody was catching even a 7-pounder. Well, you know, we were catching 7-pounders. We're down in the Central Basin. I mean, dude, every fish. And I'm like, what the fuck? You know, I'm like, because I knew that, and the guy that was with me, I'll never forget this. He was like, dude. And I said, listen, this isn't the deal. There's nobody here. You know what I mean? So sure enough, it took like an 8.5-pound average because you weren't on those fish, you know, and guys knew that. And it's just kind of funny that the irony now is just this fall, I had some guys that wanted to catch a big fish. They say, hey man, back home, you know, they had a Ranger boat. They had all their own gear. He's like, we're flying to fish with you. We just want to see we catch, like, we don't even want to keep it. Super cool dudes. They're like, we want one to take a picture of and say, hey, this is my biggest fish. I've fished, and these guys fish tournaments and all that stuff back home. And we're catching these, I would say they're 3 to 4 pounders at will. And I'm like, we got to go. And the guy was just laughing at me because I was all, you know how I am. I'm just like militant about it. Like, we got to roll. We got to go. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, dude, these are 3-4 pounders. We are not going to accidentally catch a 13-pounder right now. Yes, it happens, but the odds are so little in your favor. So we picked up and we went off. And yes, I think it takes a lot more skill to catch 5 big fish and pattern and stay on that through especially a multi-day event. I don't think anybody really can argue that does this. But if the rules are the rules, you have to retune everything that you do. I mean, I would even imagine the gear that you're going to bring is going to be completely different to Erie because of that.
Exactly. No, you're 100% right. I don't know if the lake is in play. And that, by the way, that's what I was calling you about. If the lake becomes a player, that's the only thing I was going to ask you about is a couple things from over there. But
if it is, I'm going to drive my boat up against yours and I'm going to try to get some TV time. Be like, bigwaterfishing.com, Joe Okada sucks.
But Ross, I have a question about that. So when we started filming TV 10 years ago, the number of big fish we caught always seemed to be more, but we caught a lot less fish, it seemed like back then. Now we go out, we don't catch, maybe we do catch the big fish as often, but we catch a lot more of those 4 and 5 pounders that you're talking about.
We have 100 million fish that are in a certain range, and realistically, you know, I want to catch big fish. I like doing that. But when we're filming and we've got time and financial constraints with that, yeah, I mean, what it takes, it's like that with guide clients. I had a guy just this year, and he's like, I want to catch a big fish. Well, we went and we had like 1 or 2 little tiny fish, you know, in an hour. And we're working through, because again, it's like a tournament every day. And the guy was like, oh, let's just go fish for eaters. You know, people don't want to go through what that is. Like a filming day like yesterday, we filmed an entire show in 20 minutes.
Yeah, we could have been done.
We did a 20-minute show, Joe, in 20 minutes. Like, we're setting up the boards. Oh, there's 5 on. Oh, what's happening? Spin around. Here's 3 more. Money. Where you're not going to get that many bites from dark to dark this time of year if you're targeting bigger fish. There's just not as many of them. We've got, making up the numbers, but we've got 150 million fish in Lake Erie, and we've got less than 1 million over 7 pounds. And the little ones chew. They eat anything that swims. So you have to literally get away from where they're not at. And that's not a lot of places when you figure in where the bigger ones are at. So,
no, it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. And I'm not, you know, I told you before, this is not to pit different tournament organizations against each other or make one superior to the other. It's simply a different format that you have to make adjustments to in order to be competitive in them. And part of that means maybe having to surrender seeking out the absolute largest but smallest, the minority of the population. You know, you're just changing strategies, and I don't know which way is going to be more fun or I don't know which one's going to be more enjoyable or which one I'm going to be better at, because I've always targeted just the fewest, biggest ones I can find, and some days that's really hard.
If you look at Major League Fishing, there is almost a different, some good guys, the cream rises to the top, but there are, I believe, certain people that just that format sets up better for what their brain and their fishing skill set is. But even, well, that's a whole Pandora's box. I think that one of the biggest things, and I don't know how much you're going to be real with me on this, because I know you're a straight and honest shooter, but sometimes, you know, you're a little more afraid to pop off of the mouth like I am, which is smart. Which is
it is smart.
So smart, because I'm dumb, obviously. But not having a co-angler seems like another huge difference, because I mean, you can say what you want, a good or a bad co-angler, and by saying good or bad, that's a whole thing within itself. But I mean, does that come into your brain at all?
Big time. The co-angler thing is really intriguing to me, because I do want to fish a few tournaments where it's just me against just you, and it's just my screw ups against your screw ups, and things I do against you, and that's it, and that keeps it very pure. But man, there's been more times than as far as having a good co-angler that does something to change the trajectory of the day, whether it's sticking a fish just before I was about to bail on a spot and I end up milking that spot for 30 pounds, and then I feel like we had a good day, and it was all because he clued me in through, due to a catch or a presentation or a cadence or whatever he was doing that helped change the direction of our day. There's been more times where a co-angler's been helpful from that regards, where I probably would have come in with my tail tucked between my legs if it wasn't for them to help. And but there's been and a few times there's things happen, and
let me just tell you.
Oh, go ahead.
I had a co-angler that told me, hey, I can't stand up in the boat. I mean, I could go on and on forever because it's funny, and I was like, I mean, that was that guy's physical limitation. But if you fished as a co-angler, if I would have had young Joe Okada in instead of a guy that says, hey, I can't stand up in the boat, that's a game changer. So I 100% understand what you mean about from me versus you or that guy or whoever it is. But like one of my favorite ones, and the reason I'm giving you this is because I'm opening you up because you're coming next. But okay. I had a co-angler one time, and again, this is not an ego deal, but if you're a guide that fishes every single day in a body of water, and without being egotistical, I have a pretty good track record. And I had a co-angler who looked at me when we're setting stuff up, and I'm like, okay. And he's like, so what are you going to do on your side? And I was like, here's what we're going to do. He's like, well, this is what I want to run on my side. And the guy took his day like this was his deal to like have a tournament against me. And I'm like, no, we're working together. And I'm out here every day. So
we're a team here, dude.
Yeah. And so you get that mentality, but then you get guys that are just, they want to learn. And that's, I think, the thing with the co-angler thing that has been lost when you get into Facebook, and we won't go down this rabbit hole too bad, but guys wearing tournament shirts and all the stuff. And you're like, really, you just need to step back. And I think the co-angler philosophy was met as checks and balances, but also give somebody an economical way to learn from some of the best, or learn what not to do from somebody that maybe isn't the best in their and thinks they are. But you've got to give me, because you fished way more co-angler or pro-ams or whatever you want to call them tournaments than I have at this point. What is like those one or two? I don't want you to say name anybody or anything about it, but you got to give me a good co-angler story.
I actually had a guy. Who had never walleye fished before hop in my boat. His wife actually bought him bought him an entry into the tournament as a kind of a gift certificate to go fishing with some walleye fishermen and compete in the tournament at the same time. So, I mean, from step one of how to hook a pointer board on to everything throughout the day. Not only were we competing, but it was a 101 course too, and so that I could have easily let that screw with my brain before takeoff, and then let that interfere with my decision making throughout the day. But you just no matter what odds you're faced with, sometimes you just gotta do your best. But I when I was first starting this, Ross, and I was still young, there was a couple guys that made remarks like, you don't need to be telling me this. I've been doing this since you were in diapers, and they were 100% true. But sometimes, you know this as well. You talk. You would. I'm sure you would talk your co-anglers through the cycle. When you hook up and you're reeling in, you're still just coaching them verbally as they're reeling fish in, even though they know that they have to do exactly what you're telling them. You're saying it anyways. It's a way to just cover your bases and keep the boat calm and going in the right direction before the fish is in the net. So I would, when I was young and just starting this, I'd find myself talking through things to people just to keep things going. And I think a couple of them got offended, like, don't be telling me this. I know this, and I've known it for 20 years longer than you've known this. And I don't disagree with them, but that's just how I roll on the boat. But nowadays, I'm old now, so it doesn't matter anymore. So.
Well, yeah, I've had it with guide clients where I tell them, I can kind of bust their chops just because of me, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And it's kind of the same with co-anglers. I've had people say, well, hey, I know more. Well, then why'd you hire me? Hey, then sign up as a pro. Don't sign up as a co-angler. But before people think we're complaining about it, I think breaking down what really is. Me and you are always talking just kind of how it is with us, but really breaking down what's going on. You and me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I can't imagine you disagreeing with this. We're not complaining about the co-angler thing, but people just have to understand, like me and you, that's truly how we were making our living. So it's a fun deal, but like in the bass tour, the co-angler had his own weight. Like when you're fishing walleye pro-ams, we have a combined deal. So people that maybe haven't seen these or how they work, we're working together. So like when you lose a fish that, I always used to have the guys reel them in, and then I kind of changed that towards the end of my career because I felt like the net deal was so bad with people. But I've seen a lot of pros that net and reel. They basically just kind of have the guy there because we won't name who those guys are, but you definitely know a couple we're talking about. And you hard to blame them because that's how they make their living. And they're like, hey, dude.
Sure. Guiding? No, but I think guiding helped us both prepare to have a mixed, you never know who you're going to draw for your co-angler for a tournament. And I'm not going to H2H to run away from co-anglers. Like I said, I can't thank some of them enough for either, we watch our co-anglers fish sometimes, and you pick up a lot of stuff just by watching them and what they do. It's almost like you're just being an observer of them, and then you're working together. But I really am intrigued by going out and giving this a shot just by myself and seeing how it shakes out. But it's not to dig on a co-ang, the co-angler format or anything. And who knows if this format doesn't work, if I don't feel myself moving and grooving with this new format, I'll try something else again. But I'm really looking forward to giving it a shot for sure.
That's good. A funny co-angler story that's like me and you probably were in diapers when this one took place, but I can remember old Gary Roach told me a story. He was fishing and he had a guy in the front of his boat, and Gary's a pretty humble guy, but even like amongst the boys, he'll let you know that he's gonna out jig fish you, right? Especially back then, because he definitely out jig fished the shit out of me. And he said that the guy was up in the front just shaking because he didn't have the right clothes, didn't prepared for the day, and so the guy's up there and he's just shaking. Well, he starts catching more fish than old Roach in a jig. And Roach is kind of like, hey, quit, drink some coffee, you candy ass, one of them deals. And anybody knows Gary knows he could kind of give you a dig, but make you feel good about it. And all of a sudden, Gary's back there shaking, and the guy goes, oh, you finally got too cold too, there, old timer? And he says, nope. He says, I'm watching what you're doing, shaking that jig. And he says, because there ain't no way you're going to outfish me today. One of them deals. And my words, not his exactly, but that was kind of the premise of it. And it's funny that, you absolutely can learn a lot from a guy that is doing just what he knows at that time or doesn't even realize what he's doing.
Next time we do this podcast, we do have to flip it so that I'm interviewing you. I've never exchanged words with Gary Roach in my entire life, and I would have loved to. And I just and there's a lot of people that you've got to meet and that have mentored you in your life that I'd like to pick your brain about sometime. And next time we do this, I'll be Ross, and you can just be. Well, you'll still.
Do we have to do another time? I thought my obligation was over.
Joe, why would you say you're want to be Ross? That's my question. I was like, what is wrong with this guy?
I don't think I said I want to be Ross. I said I'm willing to be Ross. I'm willing to be the interviewer.
I like it the other way. I like it the other way. And it's funny too, because I've said this doing other people's podcasts, and that's neat. And if I've done a few where it was kind of perspective pieces, and I tell people all the time, and I said with the utmost respect, I didn't learn a lot. I just said this on a podcast. I didn't learn a lot about fishing from Gary Roach, and people are like, when they don't let me finish a sentence, they're like, "Are you insane?" Because anybody that doesn't know, Gary is like the godfather of walleye fishing. I mean, he invented and refined more tactics than just about anybody will know. But at any rate, when I was with Gary, we were always trolling, so he'd call me and say, "Hey, let's go on this," because he knew it was a trolling bite, and that wasn't his deal. He didn't like it, and I was young and fast and aggressive and quick with stuff. But I learned an awful lot as a young adult, even literally not having a driver's license in those early years. I learned about life, and I learned about the business end of fishing, which those things have benefited me the most moving forward, to be honest.
Right on. Oh, that's good. Oh, I guess we don't have to have a third time. I just got all I needed to get out of you.
No, we would. You're good. You call like you see it. I mean, you don't put, your nuts on the table as much like I'd like, but I don't blame you, because who does? People are afraid to kind of get raw with that stuff anymore, but I don't know. I guess the only thing I'd say is, like, do you feel that this whole new tour is going to create completely new anglers that are performing at a high level because of the format?
I think there's a few that are just going to shine even brighter. There's a handful of anglers that seem to really have the goods and are really on a roll, and it's neat to see them. I wish I had in my brain what they do at their age, and it's cool to see them, leverage all the available resources that are out there right now to their advantage, and have the time to practice and master a lot of things. And they're hard to beat now. It's fun to watch. But I think it's also going to change the way we all fish competitively now. I mean, when you're worried about always having racking up a tally of fish throughout the day, cumulative fish, it's absolutely going to change the way we fish, and I think that's good. And there's going to be new techniques that evolve from it, and there's going to be techniques that kind of go silent because of it, and it'll be neat to see how the whole thing evolves, and I think it'll be a good thing overall. So,
well, I'll tell you what, you might have just earned your third ticket onto the show by that, because we're done with you for today. But okay. I think moving forward, you can either interview me, because God knows who loves talking about me more than me. But I think this whole, the format, I'd be interested to see how you came through the head-to-head deal. And, your thoughts on it, aside from your performance, good or bad, on how, so that'll be interesting. I think you've got a third ticket in you.
I'm actually,
that depends if the check clears from this one.
You're paying?
No, you're paying for promotion.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, okay. I'm going to tweak my investment strategy, I think. I think that I told you I was actually I might actually get a different boat to fish out of this year. Then I might actually go to a tiller boat this year, just because we don't have to. We can trail it to wherever we want to fish, and so long runs aren't a big deal. I really think that open floor concept of a tiller might. I mean, there's for pure efficiency and just the ultimate layout for all the presentations we want to do, with the exception of just a big open water trolling spread, which it doesn't matter for us anyways, because we only have 2 lines out at the most. I think it's going to be I think that might be an advantageous tool to use. So I'm looking hard at maybe getting a tiller for this year, and that'd be a lot of fun.
That's fair.
So, I mean, but those are all the things that we're thinking about to say, okay, this is a different playground. So what tools do we need to play over there versus where we've been playing for a couple decades?
So here's what we're going to do. You're going to get a third ticket as long as you don't jump me. If you spud me during the tournament or something, then you're just done. Then I'm going to get on camera for you, and I'm going to be yelling, "Joe Okada sucks," or something like that on live TV. But which will be a moment. But yeah, keep some notes, make some things ready. We're going to have you back, and I want to thank you for joining us this time because
I want to thank you for having me, Ross.
It goes so fast, Joe, because the bullshit just flows.
Every time we talk, have we ever had a phone conversation under 30 minutes? I don't think we ever have. It's there's just a lot of BS that gets spewed in a very short amount of time. It's amazing how fast it goes.
Honestly, the best part is really not BS, especially our private calls. But yeah, fishing, there's a lot. When it's your lifestyle and your passion, you got some stuff. So at any rate, we're done with you. Producer dude, he was like, yeah, this was pretty good. We'll let him on again.
It was an hour of bullshit. We were at an hour.
It was. I'm so glad we had zero direction to go for this one, but it worked out good.
Dude, here was my notes for you.
Wow.
But it all worked out. Now, some people, Joe, in fairness, they'd have to have like 10 pages of that. But at any rate, we just want to remind everybody to check us out at bigwaterfishing.com, on YouTube, Bigwater Fishing, Instagram, Facebook, Google us. We're everywhere but the jail cell, thankfully. So make sure you keep tuning in. Look at the website. Look at all our social media stuff. We're going to keep you updated, not only with our podcast, but with all the other rigmarole that we do. And hopefully it's not bullshit. And we're going to have people just like Joe Okada here rolling and bringing the content. So let us know what you like, what you don't like. And we'll try to do the best job as we can. Joe, thanks for coming on again.
Thank you, Ross.
Third time's a charm. Third time's a charm.
Yep, you betcha. See you guys.
See you.